I thought being international, going to international school meant I'm like as diverse as it gets in Tokyo. But ever since I entered Waseda, I realized my international school was just one tiny bubble. For the first time in a Japanese setting, I was able to come to the conclusion that it's okay to mix languages and to not try to like conform to one culture or one language. You can literally just like be a mix. And that in itself can be your one identity.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, subscribing is the best way to support us. It helps us grow and bring you new stories from life in Japan. All right, let's jump in. Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today I have the pleasure to welcome Gia. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You're a student from Waseda University. You recently graduated, actually, and you're kind of on your path forward. Next month. So by the time this is out, you will have graduated.
Yes, and, exactly.
You've been sharing a lot of stories from student life in Japan on your social media. So I'm very interested in hearing all these perspectives and so on. But like with all my guests, I'm curious a little bit about your background and kind of where you're from and what kind of brought you to Waseda for your studies.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know this, but I was actually born in South Korea, in Seoul. I'm a Gangnam baby. And when I was born, I was already on a flight heading to Japan. So I was in Japan my whole life. And I've actually never lived anywhere else outside of Japan, except for like the 10 months that I studied abroad in Canada. But that was in high school. So that didn't really have much impact on like my cultural identity. But yeah, so that's why a lot of people get confused, but I'm a Korean living in Japan, basically. So I was a foreigner my whole life. And yeah, and now I go to a university in Japan. But even within that university, I go to a very international faculty, which I'm sure you know. It's called SILS, Waseda. And so yeah, that's where I'm at now. And I'm about to graduate. And now I'm graduating as a full-time content creator. So yeah.
Wow. Exciting path ahead. I'm sure we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yep.
I want to go back to something you just said, 10 months in Canada in high school. How did that come to be? Where did you go?
So I actually went to this tiny island called Nova Scotia.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know this place, but I lived on a tiny island of Nova Scotia where there was like no international students. I was the only international student, basically. But I went there during my sophomore year in high school because I was kind of tired of being international student in Japan. Like that was my life from first grade all the way till high school. So I remember being like, oh, I want to try experiencing what like high school is like in Canada. So then I just researched like really safe looking Christian schools and found a very good Christian community. And that happened to be in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, I went there.
A small island of Nova Scotia. That's kind of a big change for someone that grew up in Tokyo, right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It was so different. Yeah. It was like, well, I lived next to a crack house for starters. And it was like my homestay. I did a homestay. I was living with like 2 goats and 8 chicken and 2 cats and a dog and the chickens from the neighbors. Like it was really just like a farmland house. And it was super different, but it was also really therapeutic because if you're an international student in Tokyo and you're learning like 3 languages and then you're like in Japan, but you commute to an American environment and that's your life every day, like it's very overstimulating. So in a way, that year was really therapeutic for me.
So you went to international school your whole kind of...
My whole, life, except for kindergarten. Kindergarten, I went to a Japanese kindergarten, but from first grade all the way till high school, only international school. So yeah, I think international school has its own culture. It's also not like your typical American school. Like international school is like a whole nother category, I feel like. And so it was just really tiring at times. So
how so?
I would say a lot of the international kids that grew up in Japan, I'm sure any international schools would agree with me, but there's a lot of pressure for university because there's so much money being put into your education. And you are aware of that because international schools cost a tremendous amount. And I'm sure a lot of people can attest to that. And so because of that, I think I had a lot of burden growing up, knowing that I had to probably go to like the best school in America, which I ended up not doing, which I'm sure we'll get into. But there was a lot of pressure with that just doing extracurricular activities that I didn't really care about, studying for the SAT, like joining the National Honor Society, like all these things that I wasn't really interested in doing, but I just had to do it. Because when you're an international kid, there's almost like the survival instinct where you have to do things to survive. So
when you come from the United States to Japan and you go to an international school, you just mentioned SATs and like preparing for all these things. It's kind of normal. It's kind of where you come from, and that's how the system is, and you transplant that system into another country. You were born in Korea, but you said you kind of moved here basically as a baby and have grown up here all the time. So what was it like for you to kind of go into this international, very American environment as opposed to maybe going to a normal Japanese school, which you could have done since you kind of basically grew up here?
Yeah, so I think this is why I feel very lucky that I got to experience going to international school, because I was basically surrounded by students like me who are a little bit different. I did have a few Japanese friends whose parents were both Japanese, but like maybe one of the parent has lived abroad, or I also had a lot of friends who were like Korean, raised in Japan type of a thing. So obviously because of that, I feel lucky that I was surrounded by that environment, because I do think that if I went to a Japanese public school, which my parents definitely considered, and I ended up not doing that, but if that had been the case, I do think I would have felt very different from a lot of other people, because I attended church my whole life. And in my church, there were a lot of Koreans like me who were born and raised in Japan. And they always talked about how they felt like a foreigner in their Japanese classroom setting. So I feel like for them, being the only Korean with a Korean last name, I think they grew up very insecure about that, grew up insecure about their passport or identity. Whereas I had the opportunity to just embrace that from first grade, right? Basically, because international school, everyone's like me. So yeah, I feel like my experience was very unique, but also a very, I don't know, I think I was just really lucky in terms of that.
Is the curriculum then at these international schools based on the American system?
Yes, my school is like that, but I'm sure other international schools have different curriculums, but yeah.
Does it make you feel then sometimes you're in this bubble?
Yeah.
When you're just with international students coming from all over the world, or Hafu, or even Japanese students as well that are interested in this, but never really part of the regular society, so to say.
Yeah, I would say so, because I feel like every international school, especially in Tokyo, they all have their own culture. So I feel like being international, we had our own way of saying certain phrases. We had our own language, essentially, right? Which is mixing a bunch of different languages when you like say one sentence. In fact, like we would get scolded by our teachers because we couldn't say one full sentence without putting in Japanese here and there, which I do think I've gotten like better at now, I hope. But I feel like, yeah, I think that, I forget what the question was. But
if you kind of feel in a sort of bubble when you're in this environment.
And I feel like that's a bubble. The fact that like I have to mix in languages to say one complete sentence, that was like so normal in my little bubble. And I also think that's why I went abroad in high school, because I was like, I know this is just a small bubble in a small community that I'm so grateful to be part of, but I really have to try experiencing what it's like to be like not an international student, you know, because it becomes a label. You're just an international kid in Tokyo. And I also think that within the bubble, everyone knows each other. And I thought being international and like going to international school meant I'm like as diverse as it gets in Tokyo. But ever since I entered Waseda and I went to SILS, the liberal arts school, I realized my international school was just one tiny bubble. Because going to a huge university like Waseda, there's like so many more people who are experienced living abroad, and not particularly international school, but they've lived in America. They've gone to public schools in America, despite being fully Japanese. So yeah, I think international school is a very small culture.
You mentioned the pressure of entering the universities, especially trying to go to American universities. I imagine Ivy League is kind of the dream for many.
Yes.
You decided to go to Waseda instead. What was your idea for what you wanted to do with your studies?
For me, I always wanted to go to the States or Canada, which makes sense because I went abroad in high school for Canada. But I think, first of all, like the tuition is crazy in America as an international student. And it's a struggle for international students because you essentially grow up kind of similar to American students in America in terms of like the education you receive, right? The expectation is the same. But then the cost of going to an American college, at least like a really good college, is probably going to be so expensive.
Because you do have to pay the international tuition fees as opposed to like if you're from that state, right?
Exactly. That's why I grew up being so confused because I'm like, why do I kind of feel American? I'm like very stepping careful into this, but I felt American because the education I was receiving was American. But then for some reason, when it actually came to considering college application, the season came around, I started to realize I was not. Like I was just, at the end of the day, I was a Korean passport holder. So I was like, okay, so I don't actually belong in this, American community in a way, at least when it comes to applying for schools and how costly it was for us, right? And I ended up staying in Japan because it was COVID during 2020 when I was a junior in high school. But yeah, also that too was like another added layer of pressure because I knew that if I'm going to go to Japanese university, I would probably have to learn Japanese again. And now there's like a whole nother layer of like, okay, now I have to learn Japanese again because I don't want to be that student in Waseda that like just doesn't even speak any Japanese and is like just only in her small international bubble like we were talking about earlier. So yeah, it was just interesting.
You said learn Japanese again?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So I think I said earlier, but in kindergarten, I was in a kindergarten that was like very Japanese. And so up until that point, I knew what it was like to just be a regular Japanese kid in a Japanese kindergarten. But then from first grade till 12th grade of high school, that was like kind of like locked, right? Like there was a stop to that journey. And like, yeah, I would like go to konbini and talk to the cashier in Japanese. So like maybe there's 3 seconds of Japanese I was getting per day. But just in general, like I wasn't speaking Japanese at all throughout my day, except for like the few times I would mix in languages with my international friends, right? So like when it came to going to Waseda, I had to kind of like take a step back and like reopen that chapter from kindergarten and start using Japanese again. So maybe not like sitting and like doing kanji or anything like that, but I had to relearn it in terms of like consuming Japanese media again and watching more like Japanese Netflix shows and stuff like that.
Does it make you feel pressured in a way that you kind of grew up in this country and you learn it as a young person, but then you end up in this bubble and suddenly you feel like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
I actually need to kind of learn and improve all of these aspects, which maybe I should have done before, or and then you kind of have this heavy weight above your head of like, oh, the language.
It's a pressure because you just never know what's next. I feel like a lot of international kids agree with this because the year I went to Waseda, a lot of my other friends also ended up taking a similar path where they all thought they would go to Europe or America, but they ended up staying in Japan. And a lot of it was because of like COVID and it was going to be online anyway. So they're like, why would we pay like triple to be online? So a lot of my friends were sharing the same idea that it really is like a pressure in the sense that like if something like COVID-19 ever happened again, that means our sense of like our next journey is probably going to be something we weren't even expecting. And that's probably going to happen again at one point in our lives. And so I think there's that pressure of like nothing's stable. But I think a lot of international kids, especially the ones that move around a lot, I personally haven't like moved around a lot, but my friends who have done that, we all agree that like we kind of learned to find comfort in the instability and like moving around and the chaos because we just had to from a very young age.
And then the language basically just becomes another of these kind of things that you just have to adjust. Whenever you need it, you get into it. And when you move on, you move on.
Yeah, it's almost like you just have to.
So you picked Waseda.
Yeah.
You went to sales and liberal arts, liberal studies.
Yes.
Did you have a specific study interest to begin with, or were you also there just kind of looking for something that is quite international?
I would say, first of all, I was going to a university in Japan, so I knew that within that I would have to find a program that speaks English. So that was why I chose sales. But also, I, at the time when I was a high schooler, I wanted to be a teacher. So I knew that if I go to Waseda, I'll be able to at least like get the appropriate degree. And then like once I graduate, I was planning on doing like 2 years of master's to get the degree I needed to become a teacher. So in terms of that, just everything, it aligned. But obviously I'm clearly not going to be a teacher anytime soon. But yeah, it was different from what I expected.
What was the experience like to kind of get into university coming from this bubble where suddenly you are meeting a lot of students that are coming from the public system, coming from overseas, and all the bubbles in a way are getting mixed together, and then you kind of rediscover a little bit what it is to be international?
Yeah, I think a lot of my followers have heard me say this way too many times. So I'm so sorry if you're listening to this again. But I am just so incredibly grateful because I experienced, like you just said, like all the bubbles kind of collided, and that was SILS for me. And everybody has different experiences, but at the end of the day, we all have that survival memory of like having to adjust, right? And so being able to experience that in a way, what was unique about this experience is for the first time in a Japanese setting, I was able to come to the conclusion that it's okay to be mixed in terms of like your internal culture, and to mix languages or speak multiple languages, and to not try to like conform to one culture or one language. You can literally just like be a mix, and that in itself can be like your one identity. But I think a lot of the people who graduated SILS would agree with me. I think we all came to that conclusion because we're surrounded by people like me. Like it's like me times 100 in my school. So yeah, it was a really good experience.
What was student life like at Waseda? I'm especially curious because you mentioned now a couple of times COVID.
Yes.
So I went to university before COVID.
I'm so jealous.
And during COVID, everything was online. And now maybe universities have adapted. There's a hybrid system. I don't know. But what was the university experience like for you?
The first year was mostly online for me. We were still wearing masks and stuff. So if I'm being completely honest, I don't even remember most of like what happened during my first year. I was also like not like the happiest student at that time. I was like hating life, and I just said how incredible SILS was. But during my first year, I was actually contemplating like transferring because of how much I didn't like it. But so during COVID, it was a really dark time, and everyone was online. Everyone wasn't really motivated. You can just tell, even in the Zoom calls, people just weren't like into it. You can just tell. Even the teachers weren't into it. But I think when second year came around and slowly, you know, we weren't wearing masks anymore and we were getting light back into our life like we deserve, like in our 20s, I think that's when I also started my interviews on campus. And so it was like the perfect timing where I was like, I've experienced my like the worst senior year in high school where we didn't even have a grad trip. We didn't even like have a proper, you know, graduation ceremony where all our friends and family could attend. It was the saddest few years of my life. And because of that, I think by the time me and my friends, when we were in our second year in university, we weren't really afraid to try anything. We're just like, why not? Which is why I posted my interview on the Waseda campus. And I think from there, university life became so much fun. And I think a lot of people who had to go through a pandemic during their teenage years would agree with me.
I want to get to the interviews in a little bit,
yes.
But I want to go back to your first year. You mentioned that you even considered transferring and that it was kind of not a fun time for you. And especially this transition from celebrating all the years of high school with, you know, whether it's a trip or a ceremony, taken away from you, and then entering university, which is supposed to be this kind of entering adulthood, and you experience locked in your room on Zoom calls.
Yes.
What were you and other students discussing at the time when you kind of reflect on the situation? You know, so much was going on in the world, and you're in your room and you have to take your classes online, and you're contemplating your future and your studies at the time.
If I'm being completely honest, during my first year, my followers know this because I talk about this all the time, but I wasn't the happiest person. I was a very negative person. Now it's kind of hard to believe because I literally make videos about socializing, but at the time I didn't really talk to anybody. So I also didn't really have friends to begin with. So that's for starters. But I think, I wouldn't say it was anything circumstantial. I think it was just internal. So I don't think I would have a really good answer to your question because it was all just like something within me that I had to fix. So that was a really dark time. But I will say being locked in your room, especially when you're in your first year, when you have a lot of credits you have to take, there's a lot of first periods, second periods you have to take. And it was also winter and it would get cold. And then you're like waking up at 7 a.m. to attend a Zoom call where everyone's camera's off. And it was just a pretty dark time in general. Yeah.
So it got better when you started going back to campus and socializing. And I get it goes to show a little bit the importance of having contact with other students and sharing the experience. What were some of the things that were interesting for you in that program that you were in when you actually were able to be in the classes and share the experience with students?
I would say I shifted a lot. Like during my university years, I changed my academic focus 3 times, which I think is pretty dramatic. That's a good thing about SILS. It's liberal arts, so you can choose whatever you want. But during my second year, I was actually really interested in law. So I actually did like extra classes that I didn't even have to. And I would do like 다가구부 대교 과목, which is like you can just choose any school classes you want, but you have to study like triple because I had to take a Japanese class in Waseda University with other Japanese students who are so smart that probably got accepted through like testing, right? And they grew up their whole life studying that topic. So like if you go into law, the Department of Law with other Japanese students, you're essentially studying Waseda level Japanese, first of all, for starters. Everything's in kanji. And then I studied law for like 2-3 months until I changed my focus again. And I was like taking classes in language. So I really became interested in like English syntax. So that was my specialty for a little bit. I took a lot of classes that were related to that. So phonetics, English syntax, the history of English, all that kind of thing, which was, I don't know if you've ever done it, but it's basically like math. You have to solve it. It's not just like writing an essay, which is what I thought it was, but it wasn't. But it was really interesting. So I shifted from that. And then during my 3rd and 4th year in university, when content creation became like a thing, I stopped caring about anything in particular. I just decided I'll take like whatever credits I have to take to graduate.
Shifting 3 times, is that something that is common in Japan and easy to do at universities here? I know that overseas people change and shift regularly, but in Japan as well?
I would say I was the only one in my friend group. By then I had a friend group, but I was the only one doing that. You also don't have to choose anything. You don't have to. You can just graduate with a liberal arts degree, but some people choose to do like the more specific category, which is what I was trying to do. And then I ended up not. Now I'm not going to graduate with anything specific, but yeah, but I will say the reason why I had that mindset of like, oh, I can just try different things is because my friends from my international school that I was keeping in touch with, they were transferring literally like country to country, major to major, which is probably why I thought it was normal.
You went to this international school before and then you go to Japanese university, but at an international department.
Yes.
Do you feel like the education system and the way of teaching, the way of kind of sharing the information was different in both, or was it similar because in the end both were in Japan, so to say?
Oh, that's a really good question. I will say like when I went to my international school in Japan, even though the country that I'm in is Japan, I will say at least in the classroom setting when the teacher has the power to, you know, control whatever happens in the class, it was very American. I wouldn't say my classmates were very Americanized in terms of culture, the way they thought or spoke. But yeah, the teacher themselves, very American. The way they teach, the things that they prioritize in education, very American. Like they talk more about how you should practice your presentation so much to the point that when it's time for you to speak, you're so ready that you don't need a script. It should just be like, not even like a memorization thing. You should just, you know, speak your mind and do it in a very natural way. And Waseda SILS, in my experience, it was all about memorization. And it was, I don't know, I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think people should do what they like. But a lot of my friends agree with me that Waseda SILS classes were basically just professors reading off of the slides. There were like 2 or 3 classes where the professor was very like passionate about what he was teaching, that he didn't even need the slides. But that was really rare. Like most of the classes, even the students themselves, when they present, and myself included, the slides would just have essays on the slide to just read off of the slide. And I made a video about that one time where I said I was shocked by how Seoul's, at least in my experience, was there were just essays on the slides and the classes are boring. Like, and the comments, the negative ones were saying like, well, we need to have essays written on the slides to take notes or whatever. But to me, that's like interesting because I think there's like a separate time to study off of slides or materials. And then there should be a time where someone is speaking on stage. You're there to absorb that moment, right? So that was really interesting. It was very different.
And I see some things haven't changed between
do you agree with me?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I've seen the same happening in my uni days.
I'm so glad.
It depends a lot on the professors also. I'm kind of curious.
Yeah.
At Waseda, at least at SILS, is it a mix of international and Japanese professors, or is it mostly Japanese professors? What were kind of your impressions from that?
I would say, at least in my experience, there was my classes. I'm just thinking back to my last semester. Most of my classes, the professors were Japanese that speak good English. But I do know a friend who said that her experience was most of her professors were from abroad. So I do think it just depends on what major you chose and what professors happens to be teaching that class. But yeah, I heard from my professor, the one that like I'm graduating with, there's like a Zemi class that I'm in. And he said like when SILS first began, it was just like a few professors that were very talented, skilled professors, very educated, obviously, right? That spoke good English. That just kind of came together to like start this. And now SILS is like super famous. But when it started, I think it wasn't supposed to be as like big and global as it is today. And now it's like gotten to the point where there's a lot of like researchers from Korea, China, America coming. But I think when it started, it wasn't that big yet. So
interesting. So we talked about the class experience, but what about the outside of class experience? Which from when you started in your sophomore year attending and meeting with other students, what is university life like in Japan?
I will say you can create the university life that you want and form it in the way that you want. Because during my first year, part of it was because it was online, like we said, but it was very international for me, like because all my friends were international students that moved from America to Japan to be in Japan for 4 years, for Waseda specifically. And then during my third and fourth, I started to get more Japanese friends. And then my experience became so much more Japanese. And it was cool because I always did want to experience like the typical Japanese students, like nomikai culture, bukatsu culture, sakura culture. I never wanted to be in it, but I did want to like experience it to a certain extent. So it was nice to actually experience that during my final years.
For those that are maybe not so familiar or haven't experienced it, what's the difference between like the bukatsu culture and like the sakura culture?
Oh, it's so different. Oh my goodness. Like people in bukatsu, it's like their life. Like it's basically a commitment to be, at least the bukatsus that I've seen, it's a commitment of like, I'm going to promise that most of my energy will be exerted into this, and anything surrounding that, if I cannot entertain it due to this commitment I have to make to bukatsu, then I will not do it. Like I know somebody who, Waseda Sai is a huge festival at Waseda. Everyone knows it, everyone goes to it. And I asked that person who's in bukatsu, like, did you go? And that person was like, oh, no, because I had practice. So it's really just like the norm to cancel anything that doesn't help help your bukatsu life. So it's
that
really,
could be music or sports. Or...
Yeah, I think especially sports though, because sports is very like physically taxing. So you have to like make sure you're in good shape for tomorrow's practice. Or my friends wake up at like 3:30 every day.
3:30.
Yeah,
as students.
Yes. And even like
that's
the
when
managers.
most students go to bed, no?
That's what I was thinking. But yeah, it's actually really inspirational. But I do think sakuras, like the people that do take it seriously, take it very seriously. And some people say, kore wa asobi no sakura, then it's just for fun. So I think it depends, but it's the fact that you have that flexibility to decide, right, how you want the sakura to be. Whereas bukatsu, it's like you're in it or you're not, which I think is very admirable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When it comes to sports specifically, is university sports in Japan similar to like uni sports in the States, where it's like a really big thing and the other students will cheer for their basketball team or baseball team?
I think so. I think it's a very big thing, but obviously it's different because I'm sure you've seen like Waseda no Oenbu. The way they do it is not the same as like the American cheerleaders at like A&M football games. Obviously it's different, but in terms of like how the whole school comes together, unites, and like has their school pride moment, dancing together, chanting together, I do think it's very similar.
Did you get to stay in the dorms as well of the university? Or?
No, I never did, actually. I commuted from my friend's house because I lived in a share house with my friends. So yeah.
One of the big changes for you was when you started content creation. You do a lot of interviews of other students from Waseda and other universities around Tokyo. Why did you get started in this? What got you interested into interviewing your fellow students?
So when I first filmed my first ever interview on campus, it was when my professor canceled class and me and my friends had nothing to do. And we were just sitting at the school lounge, which is now we know it's a very famous lounge. It's the Shiruzuno Lounge. At the time, when you're in it, you don't know that there's a lot of people who are dreaming to go to that school and experience that, which now I obviously know, but at the time I didn't know. So I posted a video with my tiny mic that I had in my bag. And I said to my friend, we should just film an interview because we have so much time. And I posted a very random video just asking students like, oh, what makeup product do you have in your bag? And they were just answering it. And I just put like Wasejo no kosume osusume, something like that as a title, posted it. And it didn't go like viral, but I was able to see that people cared because it was like Waseda, because it was international, and because I didn't know this about myself, but I look very like not your typical like Asian style. Like I think I talk and act in a way that's a little bit more kaigaike. So again, that was interesting that other people thought that, because now I know. But so yeah, I was like, oh, people care about this. And then I kept posting. And the more I posted, the more viral it kept getting. And then I realized that people do really find my identity or my upbringing to be something that's interesting enough to follow and watch and come back for more. Yeah.
And then you went around and around interviewing a lot of students about many things. Were you interviewing students about things that are interesting for you, or did you kind of pick up from the feedback you were getting from the online responses?
I will be really honest. I was so young. Like, I'm still young, but I was really young at the time, just like a fragile, vulnerable little girl. And I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to post anything that was controversial. Like, I was so scared of that. So it was always like, in my mind, it wasn't anything in particular that I was interested in. And if you see the video, you'll understand what I mean, because I'm really not asking anything deep or serious. But my main objective was, okay, what is a question that won't stir up controversy? So that's why I would say like, oh, I like your outfit, or I'll say like, where are you going, or what's your favorite makeup product, like trying to keep it so surface level. So I think when I started like that and I still got hate comments, I was like, okay, at this point, that's not my problem. So yeah, that was basically.
You did your first video because you were bored and just sitting in a lounge and had time.
Yes.
At what point did you decide to actively go out and do interviews?
I think it became something I wanted to take really seriously actually 5 months ago. So very recent. Up until that point, this was just going to be a side gig. It was going to be a small little side project. If for anything, I thought having this platform is probably going to benefit me when I eventually do shukatsu. Like, it was kind of like, oh, this would be a good appeal I can make. And little did I know, like, that in itself can be your own career and your own empire that you can build, which like I'm still like struggling to really like grasp, because I feel very like honored that I get to call this my full-time job. But yeah, so it was like for fun. I didn't make any money off of it. I just received a lot of like support, kept doing it. And then it became big enough to the point where I was like, if I'm going to do this and I want this to be a job, I'm going to work so hard and never look back. And that decision was 5 months ago. So it's been about 5 months since I made that decision.
Was it like a kind of conscious decision where you're sitting and pondering about, should I go and do my shukatsu and go apply for jobs, or should I do this? And then one day you just decided? Or was it like a more like a natural decision that just came like, oh no, I'm doing this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was more natural in the sense that when I decided I'm going to work really hard on this and commit my time and energy into it fully, by then I was so busy that I didn't even have time to ponder. Would this be limiting me from my possibility of doing shukatsu? Like, I didn't even have time to think about it. I think I just went crazy. Yeah.
You said that one of the challenges early on was dealing with hate comments
and
the feedback. The internet is a strange place.
It really is, yeah.
And especially when you, I guess, just start out and you just put a video of what kind of makeup do you have in your bag, and then people hate on you for being you.
Yeah.
How do you kind of take this and deal with this?
I think getting hate comments was something that I used to try to avoid, but now it's gotten to a point where obviously I do try to avoid it. Like I don't want to be a very like controversial person, but it has gotten to a point where I think you would agree, like when it becomes a job, I think you're able to really separate it into like a category of like, oh, this is what's supposed to happen when your videos are doing well. Like if a video is doing well, of course you're going to have more voices. Therefore, like the possibility of negative comments increasing is obviously going to happen. So that like mindset shift has really helped me. And also I keep saying this, but I'm very lucky with the community I'm in, my sales department friends. Whenever there was a hate comment, which was 99.9% of the time targeted towards the background that I have or my friends have, I'm able to take it straight into the classroom. And my friends are there who has lived the experience that people online are judging because they've never experienced it. And when I say like judging, I'm talking about just my friend who says, oh, I was born and raised in America. There could be a comment that just says like, "Kaigai kabure." And so like, but because I know that's not true, and I literally meet that friend again on campus, I'm able to just kind of be like, oh, that hate comment is so not true. So like, why even bother?
Do you notice a difference between the reception of your videos by the Japanese audience and foreign audience? Because I do know you post both subtitles and you do kind of a very bilingual channel.
Yeah, actually, it's really interesting. Whenever a video goes viral in America, it's usually, obviously the video I'm mostly speaking in English, which is why it reaches to America. There's been a few. For example, I asked my friends, they're my friends now, but at the time I didn't know them. But I went up to them and I said, are you guys Wasians by any chance? And it went viral, like millions. And there's a lot of engagement, a lot of comments, hate comments, good comments, neutral comment, whatever. There's hundreds. Whereas in Japan, I've noticed that a lot of people consume it and they'll come back to it later, but they're very quiet with it. So with my American audience, it's like a quick engagement. They'll reshare, they'll comment, and then they'll leave. Whereas Japanese people, they save it a lot. So there was like a video where there's only like 2 comments, but then the shares or saves, there was 1,600 saves.
Wow.
But 2 comments. So that's like goes on to show how private Japanese people are, which I really think is beautiful and cool because they are very soft-spoken, very quiet and private about their opinion.
How has starting this channel and interviewing people changed your university experience? Because you went from your first year being locked up in your room, not meeting anyone, to suddenly going around and interviewing all the students that are around you.
Such a good question.
How did that kind of maybe change your perspective or get you to meet interesting people?
I would say from this experience, Toby, seriously, I feel like you become what you think about, because when I was so depressed, locked up in my room, I think that I was just creating my own reality by being negative and by limiting myself, by dwelling on the limits I had, which was the fact that I was locked up in my room. But I think with my new mentality right now, if I were in the same exact circumstance, I truly think that Gia would find some sort of solution to that situation. So that's why I keep saying it wasn't circumstantial. I think it was something in me. Because now, when I'm graduating soon and I'm almost not going to be a Waseda student anymore. But I think the fact that there was a time in my life when I was in university I was a first year, so I was really young, but I was very kakega usui. Like no one knew me. No one knew my name, which I think a lot of people can really sympathize with this. A lot of people feel invisible in university because there's so many people around you, and the ones that already have a good friend group and they're like shining, it's hard for introverts to feel like they can fit in, and they'll be like, oh, my next 4 years is probably just gonna be like this, where I'm just private and I won't make any friends. And eventually along the way they make good friends here and there, but they kind of settle in their university life. Whereas I was lucky enough to have the platform I have today, and now people come up to me and tell me like, I chose sales because of you, or like, I've been watching you since high school, like Gia-chan, I wanted to see you. And I feel like it's been like a dream to be someone who used to not like my university life to now being the one posting, encouraging people to have a very fun, bright university life.
You talk a lot about sales, but you've also interviewed a lot of students from other universities and now trying to push people back to Waseda. How does it compare when you now have had the opportunity to talk to students from other universities? Do the experiences have a lot in common, or do you notice quite a big difference between where you go and especially maybe which department you attend?
I will say, because and this is really, I never really think before I interview people. It's always so random and in the moment type of a thing, because I also don't really have time to like plan and schedule everything so properly and formally. I've been a student my whole life, so I never was able to really commit my time to planning things out. But I think now that you ask that, when I look back, I truly feel like a lot of the students I interview are in the international department. So Hosei, I would interview GIS students. ICU, that in itself already liberal arts, so very international. And so I feel like in that way, I've noticed everyone's very similar. I will say though, every school has a very different culture. So for example, when I went to ICU, I realized how relaxed everybody was. And they all said it's because it's more in the nature-y side. And so people feel very relaxed. They're biking. They're just going from their dorm to class or whatever.
ICU is International Christian University.
Yes. That one is in like Kichijoji area. And I think people there are a little bit more relaxed. Whereas people in, for example, like Hosei, it's in Iidabashi. So it's a little bit more like city life. People are a little bit busier. But I think in general, the people, at least in my interviews, are very similar. Yeah.
So 5 months ago, you decided to make this full time. Your friends, all or most of them, probably started the shukatsu. Your life started diverging a little bit.
Yes.
For that generation that kind of experienced the end of high school and the beginning of university during COVID, now starting and entering the job market. What has the experience been like there? And I think you've also interviewed quite a few of your friends about this. And how is it like?
I think that it's a privilege to even have the option to say that I have a job that doesn't require me to walk into an office every day. But even my international friends from middle school and high school, the ones that did stay in Japan and went to a university in Japan, like for example, Keio, Waseda, Todai, wherever it may be, all of them did the shukatsu route. So I knew that I was probably the only one that was building something as crazy as social media. And social media is very new, especially in Japan, especially someone specializing in short form. It's like a huge risk and a huge commitment, obviously. So it was really scary, but I will say during my third year, second semester, that's when it's the craziest. That's when people are locked in doing shukatsu, going from interview to interview, getting rejected, getting accepted, all that. I was so busy trying to make videos that I didn't even have time to realize that what I was doing was very rare or different. And so that in itself was fine. But I will say it got really hard when, like I said, 5 months ago, when I made the decision that this is going to be my full-time thing. By then, my friends that were my grade level that's going to graduate with me already had an office job secured. And then my kohais, my juniors that were in the same class, are now doing the shukatsu. So that was like a double pressure thing where I was like, okay, so my friends my age secured, the ones that are younger doing something that I never did. So I'm a little behind. And so I will say that was really weird. It felt different. But at the end of the day, I'm very confident about my decision. So I think just having the confidence that I love what I do keeps me grounded with my decision.
You mentioned not really having had so much time up until now to plan and kind of prepare your videos, and you kind of interview people spontaneously. Now that you want to do this full time, what's your idea with what you want to do with the platform you built?
I think, if I'm being completely honest, I have no plans in terms of where Gia Lures is going to go. I'm very spontaneous when it comes to that. So I'm not 100% sure, but I will say a lot of the videos that are performing really well and people enjoy doesn't necessarily require me to be sitting in a classroom as a SIL student. I think anything that's international, anything that really allows me to express my true identity and being diverse as I am, does well anyway. So I do think it'll just be similar in that way.
So throughout the conversation, a lot of the common thread, no matter what we talked about, whether it's your upbringing or university or the content, the question of identity and this being kind of a mixing has kind of come through. How do you feel about this today? And you kind of went from this bubble to a very international space that you described as, for the first time, being a place where you could kind of just accept who you are. You've interviewed so many people that maybe have shared similar experiences. Where does it leave you kind of today thinking about this?
I feel like I still don't know who I am, because I feel like there was a time in my life when I was speaking English 99% of the time of my day. And then now I'm like speaking Japanese like 50%. And it's just been so wild. And every person I interview, every new friends I make, all have different upbringing. So I feel like I've come to the conclusion that it will always be that way, where I'll just never know. But there's like so much beauty in that mystery. But I do think that having a Japanese audience and having a platform that's mostly catered towards Japanese people, it at least allows me to understand that my identity is unique. And it's not something you would, or like a typical Japanese person wouldn't necessarily experience every single day, right? To meet someone like me. Because before I thought I was I knew I was unique in terms of the fact that, you know, logically, if you think about it, it is rare percentage wise to be having a background like me. But I do think that helps me to remind myself every day that my background is very rare.
There's one aspect of your background that you mentioned a little bit at the beginning of our conversation, which is that you are Christian and you kind of go to church and you specifically sought out a Christian school on the island of Nova Scotia, out somewhere in Canada. How is that here in Japan? Is it a large community? Is it are there many churches that you can kind of go to, or is it kind of more of a tight-knit, localized group?
It's actually, this is so funny because even though I grew up in a Christian community, my middle school, high school, elementary, everything was Christian. I myself wasn't a Christian until I turned 20. So in a way, it was really interesting because when I became a Christian, I realized, because it was my first year in university that I became a Christian. So by then, I had already experienced the full year of Waseda, but I wasn't even thinking about the fact that Waseda was not a Christian school because I didn't care because I wasn't a Christian. So why would you care, right? But it was interesting because when I became a Christian and it was my second year in university, that's when I realized like, oh, like Waseda or just Japanese universities in general, it's usually not religious. Like Japan is not a religious country at all. But growing up, if for anything, I was the one non-Christian in a Christian environment. So yeah.
You were the non-Christian in a Christian environment and decided to become Christian at age 20.
Yeah.
May I ask what kind of spurred the change?
Yeah. So there was like a time when I hit rock bottom. Like we mentioned earlier, my first year was a mess. Like I was an atheist most of my life and I didn't really believe in anything. I only believed in like something that made like scientific sense to me. I'm the type of person that needs like mathematical proof. I grew up kind of like that. Yeah, I'm very set on my beliefs. And yeah, I was very like protective of kind of preserving that too. So actually, that's why I chose Waseda and not ICU, because I was like, oh, ICU is going to feel like a chapter 2 of my Christian high school. So I went to Waseda. And when I hit rock bottom, I remember like I was just so low. I was at such a low that it didn't matter what it was. I was willing to just try anything because I was at a point where I was like, I mean, at this point, who cares? Like, I'll just try this. If it doesn't work out, then whatever. And because I grew up in a Christian community, even though I wasn't a Christian, I had a lot of like Bible verses memorized, or I had a lot of sermons that I had to attend to. I never cared about it, but I went to church every Sunday. So I did have those memories. And I guess like when I was at that low, I had something to turn to, which was Christianity. And when I did, I really felt peace in a way I couldn't like explain scientifically. No science, no math would make sense for that moment that I got saved. And so from that point, I became the one Christian in a non-Christian university. So it was super funny.
Was it, I don't know if this is the right choice of word, but like easy to convert here in Japan? Because I know that I imagine there's a lot fewer churches than maybe in France or Italy or across Europe.
Oh, 100%. I think because, like I said, when I wasn't a Christian, I didn't even want to have anything to do with it. Yet when I'm in Korea, churches everywhere, friends, Christian. Also, even though I did live in a country like Japan, where Japan's predominantly not Christian, it's only 2% or less. Despite that, I was always constantly surrounded by missionary kids, pastor kids, Christians, missionaries, whatever. And so I do think when I did become a Christian, I was seeking like a Christian community. It was really hard to find. Like at 20, like finding a church that really suited me. I also wanted to make sure I wasn't going to go to like, you know, a cult. So that was like also really hard to find because you always have to be really careful. But yeah, I will say the community is really small, but because it's small, it's very tight-knit. You said international kids are like a bubble, right? Like Christians in Japan is like even smaller. Everyone knows each other because it's so small. But I will say Japanese people, even though it's rare to be a Christian and it's very rare for you to find a Christian on the street, when you do find a Christian, they're usually like all in. They don't like pick and choose parts of the Bible they want to believe. I think in America, like a lot of my missionary friends agree with me. In America, people say like, God bless you, or like they'll say like, oh, Jesus is Lord. They'll say it casually, but you know, you see them on days where they're not going to church. Their life doesn't necessarily reflect like a Christian walk. Whereas like, I think Japanese people who say they are Christian, it's already so taboo for them to be a Christian that them making that decision probably meant that they were really serious about it, right? Whereas in America, it's more like cultural. So usually Japanese Christians are very, very serious about their faith.
These small communities of Christians that you find in Japan, are they kind of Japanese Christian communities, or are also international residents that are Christian kind of seeking those out and mingling together?
I will say, obviously, Japan does have like a lot of Japanese like Christian communities. And I'm sure I just happen to not know them because I speak English and I naturally have a tendency to look for international communities. But I will say a lot of the Christian events or like youth stuff that I have been to, at least in my experience, are usually they have like Americans or Australians that are kind of at the back organizing everything, which totally makes sense, which is why we have so many missionaries like from other countries come to Japan, because we say like the unreached country, which is Japan. Japan is an unreached country. So a lot of other foreigners will come here to reach to the unreached.
Quite interesting to kind of see a little bit how this community is evolving here in Japan, maybe lesser known than others. And I'd be curious to kind of understand it better. Maybe that will be a space for a much longer discussion focused on this.
Yeah.
Well, where does this leave you today now? We talked about kind of a lot of things. You have, by the time this is out, you'll probably have graduated. So the shukatsu period, so to say, that the student period, the gakusei period is going to be officially finished, and you're going to be with your content creation and kind of following along where this takes you. Do you have some specific things in mind already that you're very excited about that you want to do, or projects?
Yeah, I decided to take my interview style video to like a more comfortable podcast style. So I have kind of started that. And that's been doing great. Japanese people love it because I have English and Japanese subtitles, and they love that. They love any talks about Kikokushijo. So I want to continue providing that content for my Japanese audience and my international audience. So that's been really exciting. But I think for now, I'm just going to really lock in producing, and just like never look back and just keep being consistent and show up for myself. And I think all the fun, like traveling and like living my 20s type of a thing, can wait. I'm not really interested in doing that right now. I'm just really excited to like build like my platform. Yeah.
Social media changed a lot, or basically since it was established, so to say. And then this idea of becoming a full-time content creator and have this as a job is quite new. You mentioned, especially even in Japan, where it kind of came a little later. And then even more so when it's short-form content. What are kind of the things that you are considering now to make yourself successful, that you're thinking, okay, well, this is the state of social media today. This is what I need to do. This is what I need to be mindful about.
I think it's very important for any content creator. Like whenever you do post, especially if you're being very consistent and you're posting all the time and you're taking this very seriously, chances are you are going to mess up. You might sometimes even accidentally do or say or edit something in a way that isn't very pleasant for followers. But whenever you do make that mistake, to learn from it and to actually make improvements. But when you do, you have to make it very quickly. I think when you miss that timing and you get discouraged, or you get a bunch of hate or whatever, like, and you just stop posting, then it's going to be really hard to get back up. So I think it's just important for me to take notes on whatever I can improve. Even a video that does well, I always think there's like room for growth. And so not settling on this is fine, like this is my level. No, like there's always something you can do. And I think especially the flexibility of social media being so new, that means that it's always going to be rapidly growing, but also rapidly changing. So that gives you the flexibility of being more creative. Yeah.
You talked about building something. What do you imagine by this? Just creating content is something that the moment you stop, it's over. So what are you thinking about building on top of this or around the content that you're creating?
I think I want to build something that my Japanese followers, at least for now, because my audience is mainly Japanese, I'm saying Japanese, but I want my Japanese audience to see my platform as something that they can feel like safe when watching, because it's basically all my content is catered around feeling comfortable in your identity, right? And that doesn't have to be cultural. Like it can be anything. I always talk about mindset, and I always talk about how you can just feel confident in who you are, no matter what other people think, because it's your life at the end of the day, right? So I feel like I just want to build something that people can always come back to as a reminder of that. So I don't want to just produce content and just have numbers. I just want it to be something that people can remember. And I think a lot of people don't really talk about this, because you know some TikTokers that just make like very funny, like viral videos like every single day. And that's great. Like if that's what you want to do, you should do it. But there's not a lot of like, you can't really like there's nothing you're saying that's going to stay in the long run. So I feel like I want to make sure I say or do things that last.
Gia, we covered a lot of topics today.
Yeah.
Is there something that we didn't really get into that you would have loved to bring up and kind of talk about?
I don't think so. I think everything was mentioned.
We mentioned quite a bit about university life and creating content and kind of this multicultural background, which in the end concluded with it's constant work in progress and no clear answer. So maybe for people that are listening that are also struggling with this, the key is to just become comfortable with it in a way.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I literally am doing this as a foreigner in Japan, and doing something like social media, being young, being a student. Like those are, if you think about it, like very hard things to kind of like navigate, especially alone. Like I'm my own brand. Like that's actually crazy to think about, that I'm like self-employed. So I feel like if I can do it, anyone can do it. I also have crazy ADHD and I still like manage to get things done. So I feel like anyone can do it if they want to.
So for people that are interested in seeing how or where your journey takes you, they can kind of follow. We'll make sure the links are in the description so they kind of reach out, ask their questions and see what kind of interesting interviews you'll come up with, and maybe what this new podcast set looks like and this new format. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was really interesting to kind of hear your story and perspectives.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
That was amazing. Yay.
You feel like you got everything that you...
Yes. Those were...
Thank you for sticking with us all the way till the end. We really appreciate it. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the podcast. It helps us improve the show and bring you more in-depth conversations from Japan. Take care and see you next time.